This week on The Travel Show.
The swamp that's becoming a tinderbox.
Let's rehydrate this peat.
Same time, ready? 3, 2, 1.
Where the Amish go on their holidays.
I think we've been very blessed to have a place to go like this. People accept us, and it's quite unique.
Plus, what will the 20s bring for travelers? Our global guru rounds up his highlights for the coming decade. This week, we begin in a swamp.
This area is home to dark swarms of mosquitoes, blood-sucking ticks, poisonous copperheads and rattlesnakes, and even the occasional black bear.
Back in the 18th century, this place was considered so bleak and inhospitable, it was given a name that was just as unwelcoming. The Great Dismal Swamp. It's right on the border between Virginia and North Carolina. Back when the US was formed, it was around 1 million acres. Today, it's much smaller, about 1/8 of its original size. And it looks very different.
Now, it's a protected wildlife preserve with trails for biking and hiking and a lake for boating.
But the changes have brought some problems. The wetlands are now much more vulnerable to the effects of climate change. In 2011, a devastating forest fire burned through 6,500 acres, taking more than 100 days to put out. I'm meeting the man leading efforts to save the swamp.
It's a beautiful but windy day out on Lake Drummond. We're gonna push around a bit in the canoe, but we've got a good guide. Chris.
A little breezy.
What are these big trees here?
These are bald cypress trees. Bald cypress actually used to dominate the forest community here historically because it was a wetter environment. So these trees were very abundant.
Well, the Great Dismal Swamp kind of sounds like the lair of a fantasy villain, but it's beautiful here.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it's got a diversity of different ecosystems all, in this one landscape. So yeah, the name doesn't, give it a welcoming feeling, but once people get to learn the area, they realize how special it is. We're actually walking along Washington Ditch, named after George Washington, who was one partner in the Dismal Swamp Land Company. And these ditches were dug under his direction to drain the swamp, log the timber, and then farm the land.
To drain the swamp. He's not the only US president to say that.
No, I guess not.
It took more than 200 years of development for the wetlands to drain, and for the area to become just a little less dismal. In that time, the swamp featured in another chapter of American history. Before the Civil War, runaway slaves came to hide here. They formed communities, and they were called Maroons.
So these people chose to live in the swamp.
Yeah, that's because life on the plantations was so horrific that they chose to be free, and if they had to go live in the swamp to have their freedom, they just resigned themselves to do so.
With mosquitoes, with snakes, with...
Very courageous.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Eric has traced his family history back to a slave called Moses Grandy, who used to work in the swamp. After securing his freedom, Grandy wrote a memoir.
He was a waterman, He didn't have to live day to day in the swamp. He was on a plantation, but he described how some of the people who lived in the swamp and who were enslaved and hand dug the canal, he described very vividly their conditions.
And I heard you're running tours.
Yeah, we do the Underground Railroad tour based on Moses Grandy's slave narrative, dealing with the Dismal Swamp, on into Norfolk, Virginia. It's important for me to make sure that their history doesn't remain hidden, and we're looking at carrying that on from generation to generation as well.
But despite this area's dramatic past, its ecosystem is under threat. The drainage started by George Washington has dried out large sections of the swamp. Now, Chris and his team are trying to re-wet it.
This is one of our water control structures, which acts as a little dam where we can manage the water to raise water levels in the ditch, slow the drainage, and then it allows to rehydrate the peat soil. These are called boards. Put them in these channels.
Cool. And so those are about what?
6 inches.
6 inches.
Yep, about half a foot.
So it'll raise the surrounding water, it'll raise this water, and then rehydrate the surrounding area.
Correct.
And why is that important?
Of the ditch network that's been here, dries out the peat, makes it more prone to severe wildfires. It also, because it subsides, it doesn't provide a base for our forest. You need healthy soil to have a healthy forest.
It's hoped rehydrating the swamp will reduce the severity of future fires and, during the hurricane season, protect nearby communities from flooding.
By holding more of the water in the swamp, instead of just funneling down these ditches, which serve as pipes, I mean, drain pipes, it'll actually reduce some of the peak flood flows, and it also spreads out the extent of the flow.
I see.
Across the landscape.
Like a giant sponge, maybe.
Giant sponge, exactly.
Okay.
Let's rehydrate this peat.
Same time, ready?
Okay.
3,
2,
2,
1.
1. Woo! Nice. Well, it sounds like the swamp won't ever be as expansive or as dismal as it was during Washington's time, but that's not the point, is it?
No, I mean, we're never going to restore the swamp to what it was. What we're trying to do with managing the swamp is to bring back some of those past characteristics that are beneficial to promote resiliency going into the future.
And if you're planning a trip to Virginia in the near future, here are some things we think you should look out for. Where most people start is the state capital of Richmond. Our tip is to head to the new neighborhood of Scott's Addition, an old industrial zone that's been regenerated. In particular, it's become a focus for the city's huge craft beer scene. Download a walking tour and enjoy a day brewery hopping. There's more than 30 to choose from, so just make sure to take it easy. For the great outdoors, head for the Blue Ridge Mountains, and in particular, Shenandoah National Park. There are 500 miles of trails to explore and 5 campsites to stay on. Wild camping in the backcountry is also possible, but check out Shenandoah's website for some of the rules and restrictions first. And this part of the world is also NASCAR Central. There are good short stock car races at Richmond and Martinsville, but the biggest is Bristol Motor Speedway, just over the border in Tennessee. The season runs from April to September. It's cheaper to book tickets in advance, but you can turn up on race day and see it as well. Make sure to get there early though, as there's a real festival atmosphere and plenty going on besides just the racing.
Still to come on the Travel Show.
Our global guru brings us his highlights for the next 10 years. And how this place became the Amish Disneyland.
So I've learned a very important part, how to win at shuffleboard, is pick a teammate that's much better than you. That's how you win. don't go away.
Hello again. At the start of a new year, it's always fun to make some travel plans for the coming 12 months. But the beginning of 2020 gives an excuse to extend that horizon for a full decade. So this week, I'm picking some of my travel highlights for the next 10 years. 2020, of course, is an Olympic year, and Tokyo picks up the baton from Rio. I'm planning to be in the Japanese capital for the Games, but I won't be buying any flights or hotels until a few weeks before the opening ceremony, which is on the 24th of July. I've observed a pattern emerge from all the Summer Olympics since Sydney 20 years ago. Initially, prices are high, but as the extravaganza approaches, it becomes clear that supply is outstripping demand and rates begin to fall. In 2021, I'll be heading for Scotland for a transport revolution. By the end of next year, there'll be self-driving buses on a spectacular route, shuttling across the Forth Road Bridge every 20 minutes and carrying 500,000 passengers annually between the Scottish capital and the ancient kingdom of Fife. But to comply with safety laws, each vehicle will have a driver on board. By 2022, Dubai's Burj Al Khalifa could be deposed as the tallest building in the world. The JEDDAH Tower on Saudi Arabia's Red Sea coast is expected to stand at least 1 kilometre high once it's complete, with an observation deck about 2/3 of the way to the top. It will also house the highest hotel in the world. The 12th of August 2026 will be the height of the European holiday season and the date for a total eclipse of the sun. The stripe of darkness will traverse the Spanish cities of Bilbao, Zaragoza and Valencia before arriving here on the island of Mallorca. In 2027, the great British university cities of Oxford and Cambridge should be reconnected by train. 60 years after the old railway line was ripped up, they'll be barely an hour apart. Currently, the journey by bus or connecting trains takes at least twice as long. The line will also serve two very different tourist attractions: Bletchley Park, the top secret home of Second World War codebreakers, and BICESTER Shopping Village, which is exactly as it sounds. Los Angeles gets another year in the Olympic sun in 2028. The Southern Californian city last hosted the Games in 1984. Since then, downtown LA has been revitalized, and that's where I plan to base myself. After the closing ceremony, I'll walk along to Union Station and step aboard an intercity train. Either the express service that's likely to be running by then to Las Vegas, or the California high-speed rail link to San Francisco. And 2030? Well, that marks the intended completion date of an 8,000-kilometre swathe of woodland stretching across Africa from Senegal to Eritrea. The Great Green Wall project aims to transform the Sahel, the region to the south of the Sahara Desert, and build local resilience to climate change. The hope is to create 10 million jobs, some of them in tourism, as travellers flock to see the changing face of Africa and what's billed as the largest living structure on the planet. Right, that's it for now, but keep your questions coming. You can contact us on any of our social media accounts, and I'll do my very best to help. See you next time.
To end this week, I'm headed down to Sarasota on Florida's glorious Gulf Coast, where every year a small neighborhood is transformed by one of America's most distinctive communities. Welcome to Pinecraft. Since starting as a tourist resort in the 1920s, this has become a holiday hotspot for the Amish.
We have a mural here depicting everyday Amish life and a friendly man welcoming us. Maybe we can ride the horse.
The Amish are Christians that hold on to a simple, rural way of life. They're best known for their regimented plain clothes, worn for reasons of humility and modesty. They also reject most forms of modern technology, some even avoiding electricity from the national grid.
Well, I guess we grow up working. I mean, we don't just sit around doing nothing. It's always, you've got something to do. And like in the evening, of course, we read books. We don't have TV. And our children like to come home. We have cookouts. It's a very secure life. You grew up in an area where your life was always sort of, you knew what to expect.
Of course, as time goes on, it's not so simple anymore. You know, we don't do things like we did 100 years ago or 50 years ago.
This might look like a normal street in Central Florida, but actually many of these are Amish holiday homes. And if you look right here, this is a power line.
Even the Amish want to kick back on vacation. The neighborhood offers more modern conveniences than you might find in one of their traditional settlements. Bicycles and golf carts replace horse and buggies. And the holiday homes, they all have power.
We heard there's a saying that whatever happens in Pinecraft stays in Pinecraft.
Every winter and spring, an estimated 5,000 people come to visit. But if you're not Amish, you might have to prepare for a cold reception. They tend to keep themselves to themselves, not so much out of unfriendliness than modesty. And when the camera comes out, everyone tends to scatter.
I've been a lot of places, and I've met a lot of people, and I fit in most of the time. But here, obviously, I stick out like a sore thumb here, and I don't exactly know how to interact. So it can feel a little bit lonely at times.
I head to a hotel which welcomes both Amish and non-Amish guests, where, luckily, John and Wilma have agreed to sit down with me. And even then, we take a while to warm up.
So yeah, we'll have some fun, make a few little pieces for television, and yeah, tell some stories, like this one. Can you both tell me a bit about Pinecraft?
There's no other place like it in the world, I don't think.
Why do you say that?
It's really a social life for older people.
You go at the park, it's kind of a gathering place where people come, sit and visit. There's a shuffleboard down there, and people, a lot of the older guys are shuffling, mostly men, but there's always one court open for the women. So yeah, you get to know people from a lot of different areas and different denominations. You know, they come in here, and it's been interesting from that people, what we'd call outsiders, you know, that weren't really Amish, just happened to be in the area, and now they're coming back ever since. There's, you know, that Cincinnati couple,
Yeah.
and some of them, we've become close friends with them, and they're nice, clean people, you know, not, you know, people that you don't have to be ashamed of. I think we've been very blessed to have a place to go like this, and the people accept us, and yeah, it's quite unique.
On John's recommendation, I head to the park, hitching a ride on a very non-traditional mode of transportation. My new guide is Emmanuel, a longtime resident here in Pinecraft.
So this game is called Shuffleboard.
Yeah.
And what's the point?
The point is to get your puck on the area that's marked.
In Shuffleboard, players are awarded points for landing discs within the scoring area, but landed in an area called the kitchen, and you're deducted 10 points.
So my teammate is the guy over in the blue.
Okay, yeah.
It seems like quite a popular sport.
It is very popular in the winter time down here, yeah. So
And away we go.
So I will try to get up there and see what I can do. Yeah, that's right.
All right, here we go. My first ever shuffle on my first ever shuffleboard. 3, 2, 1. Oh, I knocked us both out. I'm hitting them, which I think is good, but no one scored any points. Oh.
It turns out the shuffleboard court is definitely the place to be. John has come over all the way from the hotel to cheer me on.
Yeah, I'm afraid you're not ready for the tournament.
I was playing better until you showed up, I swear. So are we gonna play or what?
No, I'm just watching.
Just criticizing from the sidelines.
Yeah, I like to criticize.
No, I don't think that was good. Our score goes up, our score goes down, and now we're at 26 and they're at 68. You might think there's 4 more rounds left, but no, it ends at 75, which means if they score 1 more, so if we don't knock this yellow one out, we lose.
Yeah, he's got to knock both of them.
He has to knock 2 of them out. And that looks like it's game over. Game over. You win.
We win.
Well, it was a learning experience. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was so much fun. I appreciate it.
Have a good trip.
How was I? I was okay?
Oh, yeah, for the first time.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, definitely.
Apparently, all it takes to make friends in Pinecraft is losing a game of shuffleboard.
Well, it looks like I'll have to practice my shuffleboard skills. And while I do that, coming up next week.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Lucy's in the Basque Country, where tourists have been paying over the odds for a local favorite. And Rajan's in Jeddah, the gateway to Mecca, finding out about the city's incredible cultural heritage.
I seem to be part of the band, which is great. No idea what I'm doing.
So make sure not to miss that. But for now, from me, Mike, Corey, and the rest of the Travel Show team here in the United States, it's goodbye.